Welcome to WhiskyCast, cask strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie, and this is episode number 720 for August 19th, 2018. Coming up in a few minutes.
We think that Lagg will really be a kind of almost a centre for research for peated whiskies as much as anything. We're going to be on a steep learning curve with it, and it's going to be exciting to see these different batches. And we're even talking about, instead of single casks, we're going to do single bogs. So it's going to be fun, and it's going to be a learning experience as well.
Isle of Arran Managing Director Euan Mitchell is really happy about the hot, dry weather this summer in Scotland because it's helping speed up construction work at the new Lagg Distillery on Arran's southern coast. The stills are scheduled to arrive at Lagg later this week, and the distillery is expected to start production after the winter holidays. We'll have more with Euan Mitchell later on WhiskyCast In-Depth. Along with the calendar of events, your voice, the What I'm Tasting This Week department, and Behind the Label, all on this episode of WhiskyCast.
This is Whiskey, Johnny Walker's Scotch whiskey, from this place and these people, Scotch makers, creating the bold and complex flavour of Johnny Walker Black Label. Step right up.
WhiskyCast, brought to you by Redbreast, the definitive single pot still Irish whiskey. Those in the know Redbreast.
Let's get started with the news. It's brought to you by Highland Park. And we'll start with the collectible whiskey market. Friday, Bonhams and McTeers both held whiskey auctions. The McTeers auction was in Glasgow, while Bonhams held its auction in Hong Kong. There, a 50-year-old bottle of Yamazaki single malt matured in Japanese Mizunara oak casks brought a high bid of $343,340. That includes a 22.5% buyer's premium. A 35-year-old Yamazaki sold for $70,228, and a 1965 Karuizawa single malt went for $62,425. Other sales of note: a 1937 Macallan fine and rare 36-year-old bottle sold for $54,622. A 56-year-old fine and rare distilled in 1946 sold for right around $50,000. And a 17-bottle collection of the first 17 annual Port Ellens in Diageo's Special Releases series went for $46,819. Meanwhile, one of the world's oldest whiskeys went on the auction block at McTeers in Glasgow. One of the 42 bottles of Gordon & MacPhail's private collection 1943 Glenlivet, aged 70 years, brought a high bid of £34,000. That's around $43,300. When it went on the market last October, the original retail price was around $40,000. Those results are not figured into the latest report from Rare Whiskey 101, the whiskey brokerage and consultancy led by Andy Simpson and former Macallan manager David Robertson. Their tracking of the UK's whiskey auction market shows increasing demand from collectors, with almost 50,000 bottles sold in the first half of 2018. That's up 27% from a year ago. And those bottles brought prices totaling £16.3 million, around $20.8 million, also up from 2017 by 46%. Whiskies from the Macallan continue to dominate the UK auction market, but Simpson and Robertson also found significant growth in demand for Highland Park, Bowmore, Rosebank, and Glendronach whiskies as well. Now, part of that collector's demand led to the rarest of things in the Speyside countryside Tuesday, a full-on traffic jam worthy of Glasgow or Edinburgh. That's because the Macallan released its new Genesis edition at 10 a.m. Tuesday morning. As we reported last week, this bottling commemorates the new Macallan distillery just across the River Spey from Craigellachie, and to put it bluntly, all hell broke loose Tuesday morning. Police had to close off the road leading from the main A941 highway to the distillery after several hundred whiskey collectors blocked it. They started lining up well before opening time, and a number of people were turned away without being able to get a bottle, either to drink or to, more likely, flip on the auction market, where some of those Genesis bottles are already showing up. Relax, gang. It's just whiskey. In other news, White & Mackay plans to modernize its Invergordon grain distillery in the Highlands, but those plans are not being received well by the distillery's workers. The company plans to cut 21 of the 110 jobs at the distillery, and those who stay on are being told to expect a pay cut of £10,000, almost $13,000 a year. The Press and Journal reports that the union representing Invergordon workers was, quote, blindsided by the scale of the cutbacks. GMB Union Highlands' Liz Gordon called the proposed pay cuts untenable and said the company's plan would have a significant impact on the community. White & Mackay CEO Brian Donahue said in a statement that the company has made no secret that its plans at Invergordon would likely include job losses and worker retraining since first announcing the project at the end of 2016. We've reported before on plans for a new Douglas Lang & Company distillery along the banks of the River Clyde in Glasgow. Back in March, Fred Lang gave us an early preview.
The site is literally a brownfield site just now at the end of what they call the Canting Basin, which is one of the wet docks off the River Clyde. And we're progressing well enough that I think probably through the course of the summer, the first trenches will be cut. We wanted quite expressly to have the first stage of the construction in place through the course of this year. It's our 70th anniversary, so it's a big year. There's loads of other events and bottlings taking place. I think the real construction will take place through 2019. We'll see.
Those plans took a big step forward this week. The Drum Property Group, which is redeveloping Pacific Quay, has filed its formal planning application with Glasgow City Council for the 7.5-acre site. The Lang family's distillery will be the centerpiece of the project, which will also include residential, office, and restaurant space. The restoration of what was the Old Taylor Distillery in Kentucky into the new Castle and Key Distillery is almost ready to be unveiled. While the distillery has been operating for months now, Castle and Key announced this weekend on social media that it will open to the public for tours starting September 19th. That's right in between the end of the Kentucky Bourbon Festival and Bourbon and Beyond in Louisville that weekend. Bookings are now available through the distillery's website. Last time around, we reported that Templeton Rye has opened its new $35 million distillery in Templeton, Iowa. It marks a new generation for the 12-year-old whiskey brand, which traces its origin story all the way back to Prohibition. I spent some time on the phone with co-founder Keith Kirchhoff this week.
We're very excited. It's going to bring a lot of jobs to the area. It's going to be good for the state of Iowa as far as tourist attraction and so forth. And nationally, we're been a national brand now. And we're doing some international trade right now. We hired a guy here a couple months ago to handle our European marketing and so forth. So we're really excited. Things are looking very well for us.
Are you worried at all about going international just as all this tax stuff and tariff stuff is taking effect?
Well, I brought that up. I said, well, gosh, with all this tariff and stuff, and the guy that is working for us, Shane said, Keith, he says, you got to understand, we haven't been introduced to the market yet, so people won't know the difference in the price. And I said, oh, that makes sense. You know what I mean? There was no tariff ever before, and if the tariff's on there now, they'll just think it was built into the price. But, I guess I don't know. We'll have to see what, we got to venture out there and see what is available, as far as customer base and so forth.
Now, with the new distillery, You're going to have about 500,000 proof gallons at full capacity, right?
Yep. We aren't quite there yet, but, it takes a while to get everything coordinated and so forth. And, that equates to about 400,000 six-pack cases.
So how do you make sure that the quality of the spirit you guys are producing in Templeton will match the quality of the spirit you guys are getting from MGP right now?
Well, MGP's been very helpful, and they gave us some samples, some new make and so forth, and that should not be a problem. In fact, we had some whiskey come out of the still and new make, and we actually thought ours tasted superior, and it was very similar to what they had done.
It was your great-grandfather that did the stuff during Prohibition, or was it your grandfather, right?
Yeah, my grandfather, Alphonse Kirchhoff, and, people ask me that all the time, what would your grandfather think of this? And I thought that over, and he'd be very proud of what we're doing, He'd probably say, for crying out loud, I didn't realize that myself and my constituents were developing a story like this, and eventually evolved into a world-class spirit. And, you had to know my grandfather. He was always a pretty shrewd character, and, one thing I think he would say is, where's my check?
He'd probably also say, how the hell did you guys spend $35 million to do what we did with a couple of copper tubs and all that stuff?
Yeah, but I think this is this is more state-of-the-art than what they had,
There's also a new 6-year-old Distillery Reserve Edition made from whiskey matured on-site in Templeton. It's only available at the distillery. And, by the way, we'll have more with Keith and a friend later on Behind the Label. We have lots of new whiskeys to mention this week, starting with the relaunch of Old Pulteney's range of single malts from the distillery in Wick, Scotland. It's located on Huddart Street, and Old Pulteney took that name for its no-age statement single malt. Huddart is bottled at 46% ABV and will sell in the UK for around £45, about $57 a bottle. There are also new 15 and 18-year-old editions to go along with the 12-year-old, which gets a new bottle design to match the rest of the range, but the whiskey inside remains the same. The 15-year-old will have a recommended retail price of £70, around $89 a bottle, and the 18-year-old will go for around £115. That's about $146. The range is now available in the UK and will gradually be available worldwide. Dewar's is adding 2 new single malts from Aberfeldy to its global travel retail lineup. The 16 and 21-year-old whiskeys are both finished in Madeira casks and will sell for around $110 and $195 each, with allowances for local exchange rates. We don't mention tasting packs very often. They usually combine small bottles of 3 or 4 different expressions from a distillery to give you a chance to try out a range of whiskeys. And most of the time they come with 50 ml airplane-size bottles. But Glenfarclas is releasing 2 new tasting packs with 200 ml bottles. One is a starter pack with the Glenfarclas 10-year-old, 12-year-old, and the cask-strength Glenfarclas 105 malts, while the second has the 15, 21, and 25-year-old malts. In the U.S., Westland Distillery is releasing the 3rd annual edition of its Garryana American single malt. This year's edition is very different from the first 2. Because of a shortage of Pacific Northwest Garryana oak, the distillery had to come up with a complex formula for vatting and finishing 3 different malt styles and 4 other cask types along with the Garryana oak. Only around 1,600 bottles of the 2018 Garryana release will be available in the U.S., with a recommended retail price of $150 each. I'll have tasting notes for it soon at whiskycast.com. And Maker's Mark is renewing its ties with the Breeders' Cup Horse Racing Classic, which will be held this November at Churchill Downs in Louisville. There will be a new limited edition bottling featuring legendary thoroughbred trainer D. Wayne Lucas, with proceeds going to the Champions for Charity program that will support the Old Friends Thoroughbred Retirement Farms and the Kentucky Derby Museum. There will also be new limited edition releases in 2019 and 2020 as well. And finally, here's a surprise for you. Royal Mile Whiskies in Edinburgh held its annual Whiskey Fringe Festival last weekend, and attendees get to vote on their favorite whiskeys of the weekend. For the first time, the winner of this year's Spirit of Whiskey Fringe Award was a blended Scotch, the Berry Brothers and Rudd 1979 Royal Mile Whiskies exclusive single cask blend. It came from a mystery cask of blended whiskey for which all of the records had been lost many years ago. Second place in the voting went to the Tomatin 36-year-old, while the summer release from Daft Mill Distillery took third place. You can keep up on the latest whiskey news all week long at whiskycast.com. The news is brought to you by Highland Park, the Orkney single malt with Viking soul. Think the Vikings only exist on television these days? Well, think again. The Draken is a modern-day Viking ship sailing along the U.S. East Coast right now. It's making tour stops from Maine to South Carolina through the end of October. And Highland Park is an official partner of the expedition. That means whiskey tastings, as well as history lessons at those tour stops. Get the entire tour schedule at drakenhh.com and find out more about the whiskey at highlandparkwhiskey.com. Time now for the WhiskyCast calendar of events. Tickets are still available for the Whiskey Guild's New York City Whiskey Cruise this Thursday night, August 23rd. Whiskey Live Adelaide is this Friday and Saturday in Adelaide, Australia, and the San Diego Spirits Festival is this coming weekend in California. Cardinal Spirits in Bloomington, Indiana hosts Cocktail Camp with bartending guru Jim Meehan. It's on August 27th and 28th. Emerald's Chop House at the Sands in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania has an evening with Woodford Reserve on August 31st. Spirit of Speyside Distilled is August 31st and September 1st in Elgin, Scotland. The inaugural Whiskey Live New Jersey is September 6th in Paramus, New Jersey. The Kentucky Bourbon Festival is September 10th through the 16th in Bardstown, Kentucky. And we'll be in Louisville the following weekend with special coverage from Bourbon and Beyond on the 22nd and 23rd. Tickets are still available. That same weekend is Whiskey Live in Paris, and the Whiskey Show is in London, September 28th through the 30th. Right now, we have 175 different events on our searchable calendar at whiskycast.com. Just use the search button to find one near you.
Redbreast fans have always cherished our whiskey's sherry notes, so we set out to embellish that character. Introducing the Redbreast Listowel edition, a quintessential single pot still Irish whiskey finished in first fill Oloroso sherry casks from Spain's prestigious Bodegas Listowel. Carrying Redbreast's trademark pot still spices and dark dried fruit notes, the Listowel edition is graced with an enduring sherry finish that would be better described as a final act. Discover the newest branch on the Redbreast family tree.
WhiskyCast In-Depth is brought to you by Lagg. Last time around, we briefly heard from Arran's Euan Mitchell about the distillery's new Explorers series of single malts, but there's a lot more going on the Isle of Arran these days. Work is underway on the island's second distillery at Lagg on the southern coast of the island. It's a distillery that will specialize in peated malts, and we'll get to that in a minute. But my conversation with Euan on Skype the other day started with the new Explorers series. What's the geographical significance of Brodick Bay, first of all, and then what did you guys do with the liquid?
Well, Brodick is the port you arrive into when you take the ferry across to Arran. So we thought it was, and it's a beautiful panorama with the village and Brodick Castle in view. So we thought that was a suitable starting point in this exploration of some beautiful locations on the island with this new series. And it seems to be going down very well.
Where do you plan to take this series after this one?
Well, the next edition will actually be celebrating our home of Lochranza itself, so that'll be coming out for the spring next year. And James is working away with some casks in the warehouse and working his magic. And we'll look forward to the next edition in the series. The first release product bay was a 20-year-old, and it was a mix of both bourbon and sherry casks, sherry hogsheads, and recast into sherry butts, which we sourced from Bodegas Tradición, which is one of the most traditional sherry bodegas in Jerez. And we think it's just got a really nice, classic, old style Arran character to it. So there's a nice bit of the sherry gives it a nice bit of backbone, but it doesn't completely dominate. You still get lots of sweet, fruity, spicy characteristics coming through as well.
How are things going at the distillery otherwise? We'll talk about Arran first, and then we'll move down to the new place. But I know you changed importers recently in the U.S., and how is that going, as well as everything else within Arran?
Yes, it's going well, but we're building up a good relationship with Castle Brands, who are our new importers, and the States is long term as a market we're really targeting for growth. It's as you know very well, it's a challenging market with all of the state to state legislation, but it remains really the world's most lucrative drinks market, and spirits and whiskey in particular are just flying there. So we really see Arran having a strong future in the States, and it's something that we're looking to build upon in the years to come.
Do you have any concerns at all about the trade issues that are going on? We haven't seen any moves yet by the U.S. to retaliate for the European tariffs on whiskey by imposing tariffs on your exports to the U.S. Do you see that as a possible concern?
We're very aware of the issue. I mean, it's obviously it's out of our hands, and we're also we'll become very accustomed to expecting the unexpected in the political arena these days. So we really just don't know what's around the corner, but we're very hopeful that common sense will prevail at the end of the day. I know that there have been meetings between the EU and the president to try and thrash this out before things really get out of hand. So we're still pretty positive and hopeful that common sense will prevail, and we'll avoid any really unnecessary tit for tat action. There's such a great demand for world whiskey at the moment, and let's not put trade barriers in the way of consumers getting access to these fantastic whiskies.
Is it fair to assume that you're taking the same approach with Brexit and the rest of Europe?
Yes, exactly. I mean, it's a step into the unknown, and there's very little that we can say, because the government in the UK really has to still fix their own agenda in that regard. So we're just really taking it as it comes. But I think when you take a look at the big picture, Scotch whisky has been through boom and bust before. It's been through prohibition. It's been through 2 world wars, and it still prevails. So I think the business community is prepared for any of the obstacles that will be thrown in our way. But we just want life to be as simple as possible, to be able to access as many markets as possible, as freely as possible, and get the whisky into consumers' hands at the end of the day.
Counting on politicians to use common sense is a dangerous proposition.
Yeah, just as I said that, I thought, I'm taking a long shot here, but I'm ever the optimist, Mark.
Let's talk about the new distillery. How are things going down at Lagg on the other end of the island?
Yes, it's moving along really well. We've enjoyed a really fine stretch of weather in Scotland, most unseasonable, and it's coming along well. So we're expecting the pot stills to be delivered. They're due in on the 24th of August. So that's obviously the pretty major landmark in the project. And then the washbacks will be arriving in September. So things are really starting to take shape. The building is taking shape, and all of the steel workers in place. The floors are there. They're just constructing the walls just now. So pretty soon we'll have a wind and watertight building, and as I say, we'll start installing the production equipment really quite soon.
And you need that wind and watertight is important up there.
It is indeed. It's an exposed site. It's a stunningly beautiful site. It looks across to the Kintyre Peninsula. You can see the Ayrshire coast, the Ailsa Craig, and even on a clear day, you can see the coast of Northern Ireland. So it's an amazing site, but it is exposed, and in the winter months, it'll be pretty wet and wild there. But perfect conditions for enjoying a good peaty dram inside.
And you've already named a manager too, James's nephew, right?
Yeah, Graham is heading down there. Graham works with us at the moment in Lochranza, and he served his apprenticeship there well. So he's from Islay originally, and he's looking forward to getting down there and getting his hands on some peat, and sort of rekindling his love affair with peated whiskies. So he's really excited about it. It's a big opportunity for him, but we've every confidence with what he's learned from his uncle that he'll grasp it with both hands.
Now, is there native peat on the island?
There is, yeah, there is. There's not a huge amount of it, but we're speaking to local landowners and Scottish Natural Heritage about the prospect of cutting some local peat. And our aim eventually is to we're growing our own local barley in the field in front of the distillery, and ideally we'd like to peat the local barley with local peat. So that's our ambition with that. But we're looking to use peat from different places as well. We'll get some peat hopefully over from Islay, from the mainland in Scotland, from different places, from different countries around the world, and really see the impact that peat from different places, from different sources has on the spirit itself. Everybody talks about with peat about what's the ppm, but there's so much more behind the story than that, and we think that Lagg will really be a kind of almost a centre for research for peated whiskies as much as anything. We're going to be on a steep learning curve with it, and it's going to be exciting to see these different batches. And we're even talking about, instead of single casks, we're going to do single bogs. So it's going to be fun, and it's going to be a learning experience as well.
So a single bog, single cask, single malt.
A triple single.
Yeah, that's what Douglas Lang would probably have called it, with Fred Lang's sense of humor. But yeah, triple single sounds about right.
Yeah, as I say, it's really just to kind of, our aim with this is for Lagg to dig deeper in all ways, and really just to sort of really look behind the ppm, which is just a number essentially, and see what impact the different types of peat have on the spirit in terms of coastal influence or more floral influence or rich smoky spiciness. There are so many ways it can influence the spirit, and we want to see how peat from different places will have that impact on the spirit, and we'll be doing these different batches to really have a look at that in some detail.
And you're still on track to begin distilling sometime next year?
We are, yeah. We're looking to commission the stills in January, and to hopefully start production in February and open to the public. Our aim is beginning of April to open to the public and let people in through the doors and see what's going on.
Anything else going on I should know about that we didn't cover?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're obviously pushing our Lagg Cask Society with the new distillery, so people have the opportunity to join the journey, and we're offering people access to the first 700 casks to be filled at Lagg, and then after that we guarantee not to sell any more casks to the public for 10 years. So it's an opportunity for people to be part of the story from the very beginning. And there are a number of other benefits associated with the society membership, including we've set aside the very first cask to be filled at Lagg will be set aside for the society. So members will have their own individually personalised bottle from cask number 1. They'll have their name up in the Stillhouse wall and our wall of fame, and you'll get access to our annual members open day for behind the scenes looks. They'll get their first look at the distillery before it opens to the public. There's a host of benefits, and right down to playing golf in the island and a night's accommodation just close to the distillery as well. So we're trying to create something of a Lagg community with this, of which the main part is the cask, obviously, but there's a whole host of things along with it as well.
What's that going to cost?
The cost of that is £6,000 altogether. And then further down the line, people would have to factor in a bottling cost as well after a minimum of 10 years maturation. So we launched that back in March this year, and to date we've sold 200 of these casks, which is just pretty good going considering the stills haven't arrived yet. So it's gathering momentum. People are seeing it as an exciting chance to be part of a distillery story from the very beginning, and to really feel part of it, literally be in with the bricks. And it's something we think will be of real interest to whiskey lovers around the world.
You'll find links for more details on both the Arran and Lagg distilleries in our show notes for this episode at whiskycast.com. And thanks to Arran Managing Director Euan Mitchell for spending some time with us on WhiskyCast In-Depth. It's brought to you by Lagavulin, the legendary Islay single malt. Look for that classic Lagavulin 16-year-old, along with the Distillers Edition and the throwback 8-year-old Lagavulin at a good whiskey shop near you. Find out more at malts.com. The What I'm Tasting This Week department is brought to you by Heaven Hill Distillery. I received a sample of this year's Parker's Heritage Collection bourbon from Heaven Hill the other day. As we've reported before, this year's release is a 7-year-old bourbon finished in orange Curacao liqueur barrels, and it's bottled at 55% ABV. The nose has notes of orange marmalade and toasted bread, along with red grapes, soft spices, brown sugar, and caramel candy. The taste is spicy but well balanced with black pepper, cilantro, orange marmalade, vanilla, brown sugar, and caramel, while the finish is long and smooth with a touch of orange peel. I'm scoring the 2018 Parker's Heritage Collection bourbon a 90. I tasted a mysterious single malt from Montana the other day while I was in Portland. Montgomery single malt is distilled by the Montgomery family in Missoula, Montana, and there's been an annual release each November for the last couple of years. A 3-year-old in November of 2016, and a 4-year-old last November. That's the one I tasted, and no one at the bar seemed to know anything about this one. So we did a little research. It's bottled at 45% ABV, and the nose is malty and grainy with popcorn, barley sugar, honey, and hints of linseed oil and lemon zest. The taste is malty and smooth with gentle spices, barley sugar, honey, vanilla, and a hint of cocoa beans. And the finish is long and sweet with honey and subtle fruity notes, along with a gentle spiciness in the background. I'm scoring the Montgomery single malt from Montana an 89. I'll have more tasting notes in just a minute, but first, this week's tasting notes are brought to you by Heaven Hill Distillery, proud to announce a new grain to glass project where proprietary seed and unique mash bills re-examine the variables that go into making whiskey. See more at heavenhilldistillery.com/blog. Think wisely, drink wisely. Wilderness Trail Distillery in Danville, Kentucky, released its first bourbon recently, a 4-year-old bottled in bond single barrel made using a sweet mash fermentation instead of the usual sour mash style. I picked up a bottle when I was in Louisville a couple of weeks ago, and as with all bottled in bond whiskeys, it's bottled at 50% ABV. The nose has soft spices, along with caramel, honey, and vanilla notes. The taste has a black pepper spiciness that's not overpowering and balanced well by honey, caramel, dark chocolate, and a hint of tree fruits. The finish is very long with spices that last and last, along with honey and caramel in the background. It's an excellent debut, and I'm scoring the Wilderness Trail Bottled in Bond Single Barrel Bourbon a 92. Finally, Rocktown Distillery in Little Rock, Arkansas, is celebrating its 8th anniversary this month. Founder Phil Brandon bottles a unique whiskey each year to mark the occasion, and this year's is a bottled in bond Arkansas straight rye. Once again, it's bottled at 50% ABV, and the nose has good rye spicy touches of clove, allspice, and nutmeg, along with just a hint of dill, caramel, vanilla, and honey. The taste has a good buildup of spices with clove, white pepper, and allspice notes, balanced nicely by caramel, vanilla, and honey in the background. And the finish is long with nice lingering spices and just a hint of honey. This one may well be Rocktown's best whiskey yet. I'm scoring their 8th anniversary Bottled in Bond Straight Rye a 92. The What I'm Tasting This Week department is brought to you by Heaven Hill Distillery. I'll be adding these tasting notes to our searchable list of more than 2,250 different whiskeys from around the world at whiskycast.com.
This is whiskey. Johnny Walker's Scotch whiskey. From this place, and these places in that place. These are the people that make it. Aging in oak for 12 long years. See, the land that shapes these people and the people that shape this whiskey all shape how bloody good it tastes. Bold as it is complex. For every step you take, this is Johnny Walker Black Label, friends. Step right up.
Cut. Can I drink this now?
Johnny Walker Black Label Blended Scotch Whiskey. 40% alcohol by volume. Imported by Diageo North America, Norwalk, Connecticut. Please drink responsibly.
Just a quick program note. We have a new episode of WhiskyCast HD online now. Last time around, I mentioned that Sazerac had released a video of the cleanup work going on at the Barton 1792 Distillery in Bardstown, Kentucky, following last month's rickhouse collapse. It'll be months before all of the debris from the estimated 18,000 barrels in that rickhouse is cleaned up, but we have been able to get a copy of that video, and you can watch it at whiskycast.com and YouTube, or download it from iTunes. Let's open up the inbox now for Your Voice, presented by Lot 40. We got the greatest compliment in the world this week from Raphael Franz on Twitter. One of the most interesting podcasts I've found these days since I began reading about whiskey. WhiskyCast helps improving my English. Greetings from Brazil. Thank you, Raphael. Glad we're able to help with more than just your whiskey education. And he also added after that, whiskey is culture. You got that right, Raphael. More comments on our poll and discussion in the last couple of episodes on whether there should be a formal definition for the term master distiller. Rick Wright of St. Louis, Missouri, at STLRWW on Twitter sent this along. No definition. Like Justice Potter Stewart regarding pornography, I don't know the definition, but I know it when I see it. And Mark Schilling tweeted from Texas, my fear is that if we end up with one, it won't really be meaningful enough to mean anything, but if there were, I'd love to see minimum qualifications and experience, as well as some sort of agreement or invitation from peers. Finally, Howell Wright tweeted this note from Colorado. Just found your podcast this weekend. Sad to know I've already missed 700 plus. I won't miss the next 700. No need to be sad, Howell. All of our past episodes are in the archives at whiskycast.com. Take a month or two of vacation time and get caught up. Now, if you don't have that kind of time on your hands, and frankly, who does, but you still want to be part of our Cask Strength community, you can always share your thoughts on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Tumblr with us. Just look for us at WhiskyCast. And you can also do it on the Your Voice page at whiskycast.com. Our email address is comments@whiskycast.com, too. Your Voice is presented by Lot 40, Canada's award-winning 100% pot still rye whiskey. Lot 40, unapologetically Canadian. Please drink responsibly. Let's close out the show now with Your Voice, our inside look at the science, history, and other things that make whiskey unique. Animals have been a part of distillery life almost since the beginning of whiskey distilling centuries ago, when distillers were usually full-time farmers. There are the cats that many distilleries had and still have around to keep the mice and other rodents out of the grain. For decades, Chivas Brothers had a flock of geese patrolling its warehouses in Dumbarton, Scotland, because the geese would squawk if anyone tried to get in. And other distilleries have dogs just because. Earlier in the show, we heard from Templeton Rye's Keith Kirchhoff. And here's a bit of full disclosure. That interview was edited because of a minor interruption. But it got us started for a couple of minutes on the subject of distillery animals today. Here's the unedited interview.
And it was very similar to what they had done.
We have a very dog-friendly workplace around here.
That's obvious, huh?
Yeah, that's how it is. You know, distilleries have cats, podcast studios have dogs.
That's funny. No, I don't think we have any animals in our distillery.
I'm sure you've got a few. You just haven't found them yet. You've got to have a couple of critters around there. This is Iowa, after all.
Yeah, but I don't think they'll be cats. But
well, you have to have the cats to keep the mice away.
Oh, I tell you what, we got pretty good religious guy taking care of our that problem. You know, he comes around every week and has the bait traps and whatever out there. So we really don't have a problem with that. You know, in Iowa, you'd think with all the corn and stuff it'd be an issue, but it's not.
You got enough owls and stuff to take care of them.
Not that it can't be, though. You got to be on top of it.
By the way, those barks at the beginning? Thanks, Bear. If you have something you'd like us to look at on Behind the Label, just use the contact form at whiskycast.com to get in touch with us. That's also where you'll find links for our WhiskyCast HD videos and the WhiskyCast Tasting Panel podcast, brought to you by the Whiskey Exchange, along with the latest whiskey news, events, photos, and a complete archive of our past episodes all the way back to 2005. If you like what you've heard on WhiskyCast, tell a friend. Better yet, show them how to download WhiskyCast on their phone or tablet. You can also show your support by leaving a review or rating for us on your favorite podcast apps. Those ratings do figure into search results that help other whiskey lovers discover WhiskyCast when they're looking for podcasts. And if you ever have a question or a comment, you can always reach us by email. The address is comments@whiskycast.com.
WhiskyCast. Brought to you by Redbreast, the definitive single pot still Irish whiskey. Those in the know Redbreast.
This is whiskey, Johnny Walker's Scotch whiskey, from this place and these people, aye, Scotch makers, creating the bold and complex flavour of Johnny Walker Black Label. Step right up.
WhiskyCast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2018, and comes to you from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening.